There are loads of different options for shelter or even emergency shelter out in the hills. A full-on tent, bivvy bags, emergency shelter options such as the blizzard pack or the classic foil blankets, even carrying a tarp. But today I'm going to take a look at the Bothy bag, popular in the UK and Scandinavia, but not so much stateside, and talk about some of the reasons I might choose to carry this out on a trip to the hills. Now the Bothy bag really is just a large nylon or polyester bag designed for multiple people to sit inside facing the centre. Now they're available in sizes from 2 to 12 typically. The particular one I use for independent trips into the hills is this Lomo 2 to 3 man emergency storm shelter. It's made of PE-coated polyester with a 3000mm hydrostatic head, which does quite a good job of keeping the wind and rain out. It's about 21 by 10 centimetres when folded away, so about the size of a water bottle, and weighs about 360 grams, so there's not much of a weight penalty for carrying this in the hills. So what better way to show how the Bothy bag works than by going out and using it? Well, unfortunately it's actually gone a bit more pleasant now, so it's only about 3 degrees, so it's not too warm. But the rain and snow we've been having has eased off a bit and the wind's dropped right off, so it's actually quite pleasant. Which is probably good from a sound perspective, but not so good from a demonstration perspective. And so they are marketed as an emergency shelter, and they obviously will function as that, keeping both the wind and the rain off. But where they're super handy is when you're out in the hills, it's windy and rainy, and you want to just get out of the wind and rain to eat your lunch or have a drink, etc. So what are some of the other good things about the Bothy bag? Well, firstly, the speed of deployment. You can pretty much just plot up anywhere you like, sit on the ground and throw one of these things over you. It can be up in less than a minute. There's no staking out to worry about, no poles to worry about, etc. Secondly, of course, they can be used anywhere. You don't need what about pegging, which means you can use it on rocky ground. You don't need to worry about any specific wind direction because they're covered from all angles. Anybody who's used a bivvy bag or a space blanket or something like that in the cold and the rain will know actually how cold and unpleasant it is to be wrapped up like that. Even though you're protected from the elements, it can get claustrophobic very quickly. It isn't so warm, it isn't very sociable, you know, and that aspect of being able to get into one of these with a friend, or if you use a larger shelter with multiple people, is really quite nice. It means you can all sit together, you can all have your lunch, you can all get out the wind and have a rest without having to endure the elements. They are also very lightweight on a per person basis. Yeah, a small tarp or something maybe slightly lighter, or a space blanket, but hey, you're not going to roll up a space blanket to sit and eat your sandwiches and get out of the wind. If you go for a bigger option and you have 4 or 5 people or even more sheltering in one of these, it might weigh as little as 100 grams per person in total. So again, it's a very lightweight option for a very usable shelter. That ease of deployment also has a really useful and practical purpose. If you slip in the mountains by yourself, or even as a group, and you break a leg, or one of your party breaks a leg, it's not that easy necessarily to rig up something like a tarp or even a tent, especially on rocky ground, to provide that shelter. Even with a broken leg, as you kind of pull this over your head, sit down, cinch the draw cord around you, it's very easy to set up and it's very easy to get that shelter quite quickly, which is obviously very important in cold environments when you're looking for emergency shelter. This example from Lomo also has another few features which are nice to have. It does have some clear windows, which obviously are nice to be able to see what's going on outside. It also features a couple of reflective panels, so if you are hoping to be rescued, then it would be easier for searchers to locate you in the dark with torches, etc. The way I set this up usually is get the stuff I need out, put my rucksack on the other end to lean against it, maybe use a pole like this to brace it out of it and stop it flapping about in the wind quite so much. Also, if I'm using this independently, then finding a rock or a log or a tree or something to lean on is obviously preferential. because it avoids getting backache just trying to sit still on flat ground. You can of course use your rucksack to lean against as well. Another nice thing is, depending on how you configure it, obviously you can put a stove down here to make a cup of coffee or cook some soup or something else. So again, certainly if you're out in bad elements or you're trapped out, say with a broken leg for instance, that can make a huge difference to morale. Now there are a few disadvantages to the use of Bothy bags as an emergency shelter. Firstly, it is this, you are in a sitting position, so if you have got a prone casualty and you're looking at a small Bothy bag like this, you know, it isn't something you're lying flat in particularly. You could obviously rig it up to cover their head end, for instance, if they had something like a survival bag as well. Secondly, as it's an unpoled design, there is a bit of flap around. In the high wind it can flap around, and if there's a bit of condensation on the inside, that can obviously then fall off and get onto you. It can develop condensation if you're in here for any long period of time. This version, Lomo, has a couple of ventilation tubes, others have different ventilation setups, but again, a bit of a waft of an air underneath can help there. Again, if you wanted to spend hours in one of these things, you'd probably find condensation forming on the walls, which would make it a little bit uncomfortable, but again, better than being out directly in the elements. And again, you quite quickly develop this little microclimate in here, so you start to feel quite warm. As I say, it's not super cool today at 3 odd degrees, which is around 37 degrees Fahrenheit, so 3 degrees Celsius or 37 degrees Fahrenheit in US terms. But I'm very warm and snug here in my fleece and more waterproof set outside. Another of the downsides, of course, is that as you are the frame for the shelter, whether it's one of you or multiple people, you are pushed against the sides of it with your back and your head, for instance. Now, as you all know from touching the edges of cold tents, you can feel heat sucked out that way, so anything you can do to insulate yourself from the edge, whether that's a bit of a pad or a bit of clothing behind your back between you and the outside, that can all help keep you much more comfortable in cold conditions. Additionally, as you are sat on the ground, if you wanted to use it for a long period of time, that can be a bit uncomfortable. We all know that sitting on flat ground without anything to lean on isn't too comfortable, so I'd always recommend finding a rock to lean on, or a tree, or even leaning the small of your back against your rucksack, which can all help make it a much more comfortable experience if you want to spend any time there. So when do I pick this as my option? Well, it's for day hikes. I don't take this on multi-day journeys particularly, as I'll usually be carrying a tent or a tarp or something else for sleeping under. I will take it where rain is forecast or high winds and rain, because I'll want to get out of those elements for a break at some point, most likely. Tarps can be a bit slow and complex to rig. You're not going to make yourself or even boil a kettle under a survival blanket or in a bivvy bag. This allows all of those things, so it's a great choice for those days out where you need just a bit of shelter with that emergency backup as well. If I was doing something like a fell run or just a couple of hours out, I probably wouldn't take it. Again, I'd opt for the space blanket under those circumstances, because I'm really just thinking about something for use as an emergency shelter. They're not expensive to purchase, these ones. This Lomo example, which is at the cheaper end of the market, is around 20 to 30 pounds on Amazon. Obviously more fancy ones and more lightweight ones cost more money, so it's all horses for courses really, but I'll always be happy to chuck this in the rucksack for a day out in the hills for those benefits it brings. So there we have it, Bothy bags, a useful dual purpose shelter, both providing emergency shelter and somewhere a bit more relaxed to get out of the elements and enjoy your lunch or a coffee, etc.